A heated clash breaks out in a Detroit federal court when guards call a simple soil tester a security threat. Actually, this tool holds the proof that a rich real estate company poisoned kids with lead, and Judge Beatrice Calloway protects them. Inside room 3C, Judge Calloway yells insults at Brianna Jenkins, a black girl, and throws away her 8 months of research. Brianna has just one goal: to bring this data to a 10 o'clock a.m. hearing and save the young kids. Facing isolation, threats of getting kicked out, and losing her machine, she only has one weapon left: calling her dad. Will the real name of her unknown dad make the whole courtroom shake with fear? Before that court date, Brianna's life looked much smaller. It looked quiet. It looked like dust and old fences. She lived in the Jefferson neighborhood, on the east side of Detroit. Rusty chain-link fences lined the streets. Broken glass caught the morning light near empty lots. Brianna Jenkins was 16 years old. She rode a bike with a bent front wheel every morning before school. The chain rattled with every turn of the pedals. A rubber band held one broken brake in place. Neighbors waved from their porches as she passed. Most of them knew her only as a quiet, polite girl. Few of them knew how much she carried in her mind. She studied biochemistry books late at night by flashlight. She taught herself to read scientific papers most adults skipped. Teachers at her school noticed her sharp questions in class. They never guessed the reason behind her hunger for facts. She kept a secret most people never guessed. Her father was David Jenkins, the Attorney General of the United States. She used her mother's last name to stay hidden. Powerful men had made enemies of her father. Brianna chose a quiet life to keep her grandmother safe. Her mother had passed away when Brianna was 9. After that, her father sent her to live with Martha in Detroit. He believed a normal childhood would keep her out of danger. He called every Sunday night at exactly 7 o'clock. Brianna always answered from the porch, speaking in a whisper. She missed him more than she ever admitted out loud. Still, she understood why he stayed far away. Enemies of a top federal official could be ruthless. A quiet girl on a quiet street stayed safe. That was the deal they had both accepted. She lived with her grandmother, Martha, in a small wood house. The porch steps creaked under every footstep. Martha's hands shook now, from age and hard years of work. Brianna cooked dinner most nights, so Martha could rest. The house smelled of old wood and lavender soap. A single lamp lit the kitchen table each evening. Martha had raised 6 children in that same small house. Now her joints ached whenever the weather turned cold. Brianna helped her up the stairs every single night. Money was always tight, but never a source of shame. Martha grew tomatoes in a chipped plastic bucket. She traded vegetables with neighbors for eggs and bread. Brianna never once complained about what they lacked. She only worried about what the dirt outside might be hiding. Every afternoon, Brianna rode along the fence line of a construction site. The sign read Thorn Crest Enterprises in bold gold letters. Workers dumped fresh dirt near the old ball field. Brianna scooped small samples into plastic bags. She carried them home in her backpack, careful not to spill a single grain. Big yellow trucks rumbled past the fence every hour. Dust rose in thick clouds behind each heavy tire. Workers wore masks and thick gloves while handling the soil. Brianna noticed how carefully they avoided touching it directly. That detail stuck in her mind for weeks. She kept a small trowel wrapped in cloth in her bag. She marked each sample bag with the date and spot. Some days, a guard walked the fence line slowly. Brianna learned his patrol schedule down to the minute. She timed her visits when he looked away. In her room, she had built something strange and wonderful. It was a lead detector made from scrap parts. She bought the pieces at a flea market for $147.50. Wires ran across an old circuit board. A small screen blinked green, then sometimes red. She wrote every reading in a leather notebook. The cover was cracked and soft from years of handling. It had belonged to her mother before she passed away. Numbers filled page after page in tiny handwriting. Dates sat neatly beside every entry, careful and exact. She treated each page like a piece of evidence. One evening, her machine beeped loud and sharp. The screen showed 240 parts per million of lead. That number was more than 3 times the federal safety limit. Brianna stared at the screen for a long moment. Her stomach tightened like a fist. She looked out her window at the ball field below. Kids played tag near the very spot she tested. A cold feeling crawled up her spine. What was hiding under all that fresh dirt? That night, dinner was boiled potatoes and dry bread. Martha noticed the worry on Brianna's face. "You've got that look again," Martha said softly. Brianna showed her the number on the screen. Martha frowned, but said nothing more. The next afternoon changed everything. Brianna watched over Maya, a 6-year-old neighbor girl, most days after school. Maya loved chasing butterflies near the playground fence. At 4:15 that afternoon, Maya suddenly dropped to the grass. Foam bubbled at the corner of her mouth. Her small body shook without stopping. Brianna scooped her up and ran. She sprinted 3 long blocks to the free clinic. Her lungs burned, but she never slowed down. A nurse rushed Maya straight to the back room. The doctor came out 20 minutes later. His face looked pale and tired. "Her blood lead level is 45, he said quietly. That number sat far above any safe amount for a child. "If this soil doesn't change, more kids will suffer," he added. Through the window, Brianna watched nurses hook up in 4-line. Maya's small chest rose and fell under a thin blanket. Her mother sat beside the bed, sobbing into her hands. Brianna had watched Maya grow up on that same street. She had taught her how to skip rope last summer. The doctor placed a gentle hand on Brianna's shoulder. "You said you've been testing this soil," he said. Brianna nodded, pulling out her cracked leather notebook. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening slowly. "This is exactly the kind of proof we need," he told her. Brianna gripped her notebook tighter. She was the only person with real proof. She had 8 months of numbers, dates, and locations. No one else had tracked this poison so closely. Then she learned something worse. Thorncrest was covering the dirty land with a thin layer of clean soil. They planned to build fancy apartments right on top. They never cleaned the poison underneath at all. Could one 16-year-old really stand up to a company worth billions? The question followed her home, that night, heavy as a stone. 2 men in dark suits knocked on her door at 11:30 that night. They said they worked for Thorncrest. One man held out a check for $10,000. He wanted her samples, and her silence, nothing more. The porch light flickered above their heads. One man kept glancing back toward a black car parked outside. The other stared at Brianna with a thin, practiced smile. His cologne drifted through the doorway, sharp and sweet. Martha stood behind Brianna, gripping the door frame tightly. "Just sign here," the man said, holding out a pen. "Everybody wins tonight." Brianna looked at the check, then at his face. She noticed his hand did not shake at all. That confidence made her more certain something was very wrong. Brianna refused without blinking. The man's jaw tightened. He kicked over a clay flower pot on the porch. It shattered into a dozen pieces on the wood. Martha cried at the kitchen table after they left. "People like us can't win against people like them," she whispered. "They'll hurt us, baby. Please stop." Brianna looked down at her cracked screen. The fall had left a spiderweb crack across the glass. For a moment, she wanted to quit. She wanted to protect her grandmother above all else. Doubt crawled through her chest like smoke. Then her phone buzzed with a message from the clinic. Maya had been moved to intensive care. Her kidneys were failing from the lead in her blood. Brianna's hands went cold and still. Would she choose safety, or would she choose Maya's life? She remembered an old scientist named Dr. Raymond Vance. He used to work for the city before he lost everything. People said he spoke too much truth about pollution. Brianna found his cluttered office 2 days later. Dust covered stacks of papers on every shelf. A faded city seal still hung crooked on the wall. At first, he barely looked up from his desk. "I don't help people anymore," he said flatly. He had lost his career fighting Thorncrest years before. He wanted nothing to do with that fight again. Brianna set her broken machine on his table. She explained her calibration method, step by step. She showed him an algorithm she wrote herself. It corrected errors down to 0.2%. Dr. Vance leaned forward, surprised by her precision. He asked question after question, testing her knowledge. Brianna answered each one without hesitation. Something in his tired eyes began to change. He remembered being young once, chasing the same kind of truth. Years ago, Thorncrest had destroyed his reputation with lies. They called him a fraud in every local newspaper. He lost his job at the city lab soon after. He had not touched a soil sample in 6 years. Looking at Brianna, he saw his younger self reflected back. Stubborn, certain, willing to lose everything for the truth. Something inside his chest loosened for the first time in years. He wiped dust off an old testing kit in the corner. He pulled an old folder from a locked drawer. Inside were records of environmental lawsuits from years past. These cases were buried, he said. Every single one got thrown out. He told her to bring everything to room 3C. A city hearing would happen there at 10 o'clock the next morning. You have the tool. You have the mind, he said. Now you need to be brave. Before she left, he added one more detail. All those old lawsuits shared one thing in common. A single judge had dismissed every single case. Her name was Beatrice Calloway. Was Brianna's real fight bigger than one greedy company? Was she about to challenge the whole system behind it? The next morning, Brianna woke before sunrise. She pulled on a faded denim jacket, soft from years of wear. She wrapped her machine in an old kitchen towel. At 6:45, she boarded the number 25 bus downtown. She stared out the window at a folded paper map. Red dots covered the page, marking poison sites. 8 months of walking, testing, and writing filled that map. Every dot represented a family in danger. The federal courthouse rose above the street like a mountain. Its marble walls gleamed under the morning sun. Brianna felt small standing at the entrance. Her sneakers were worn thin at the toes. She signed the visitor log in careful handwriting. Brianna Jenkins, it read, nothing more. A guard at the metal detector stopped her at the door. He pointed at the wires poking from her towel. This looks like some kind of device, he said. Brianna had to explain her machine for 20 long minutes. Every second felt like it might cost her the hearing. A second guard called for a supervisor to inspect the wires. The supervisor turned the machine over in his hands slowly. He asked Brianna to explain each circuit and wire. She spoke clearly, without rushing a single word. Behind her, the hallway clock ticked past 9 o'clock. Other visitors in line began to whisper and stare. Brianna kept her eyes on the machine, not the crowd. Finally, the supervisor nodded and waved her through. Straight to security screening, he said. No stops. Would she make it inside before the courtroom doors closed? She finally passed through and reached the 3rd floor. The hallway buzzed with lawyers and worried families. A woman named Clara stood near the courtroom doors. She represented other Jefferson families fighting for clean soil. Clara smiled kindly and shook Brianna's hand. You're not alone in this, she said. Relief washed briefly over Brianna's tired shoulders. Then a man in an expensive suit approached them. His name was Marcus Vance, son of Dr. Vance. He worked as a lawyer for Thorncrest Enterprises now. He looked at Brianna with open disgust. He knocked a cup of coffee across her papers. Brown liquid soaked through pages of careful research. Brianna calmly wiped each page dry with a napkin. Her hands did not shake at all. Marcus wore a suit that cost more than Martha's monthly bills. His shoes clicked loud against the marble floor. He leaned close, lowering his voice to a hiss. Nobody in this building will believe a kid, he said. Brianna kept folding her damp papers, without looking up. A few feet away, Clara watched the whole scene unfold. Her fists tightened at her sides in quiet anger. She had seen men like Marcus before, many times. She knew exactly how this kind of bullying worked. Get lost, kid, Marcus sneered at her. Or I'll sue you for $5 million. Clara pulled Brianna aside and whispered fast. Calloway just took secret campaign money from Thorncrest, she said. How could Brianna present real evidence to a judge who was already bought? Inside room 3C, the air felt heavy and cold. Brianna slipped into a seat in the public rows. Judge Beatrice Calloway ruled the room like a queen. She banged her gavel and dismissed complaint after complaint. Insufficient federal-grade evidence, she snapped again and again. Families around Brianna hung their heads in defeat. Brianna checked her machine one more time. Her heart pounded past 100 beats a minute. The clock on the wall read 9:15 sharp. She was not on the official witness list. Somehow, she had to find her way to that podium. Then Marcus Vance stood and addressed the court. He held up a report claiming the soil was safe. It was completely false, built on fake numbers. How could Brianna speak the truth when lies stood in her way? Brianna rose from her seat anyway. She walked forward, holding her machine high. Her stack of research sat clutched against her chest. The room fell silent, watching a teenage girl approach the bench. Judge Calloway's eyes narrowed with disgust. She swept Brianna's papers off the table with one hand. They scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. "This is hazardous garbage," she barked, pointing at the machine. She stood up from her tall leather chair. Her heels clicked sharp against the wooden floor. She circled Brianna slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. The courtroom lights caught the diamond ring on her finger. She looked Brianna up and down with open contempt. "Do you know where you are?" Calloway asked coldly. "This is a federal courtroom, not a science fair." A few lawyers in the back rows chuckled quietly. Brianna kept her eyes forward, her chin steady. She did not flinch, even as her pulse raced. "Get this security threat out of my courtroom," she ordered 2 guards. They stepped forward and gripped Brianna's arms. Brianna did not fight them. She simply stood tall and still. Calloway leaned over the bench, voice sharp as glass. "You're just a dreaming black girl from the slums," she spat. "Even your own father doesn't care where you end up." Gasps rippled quietly through the courtroom crowd. The guards began pulling Brianna toward the exit doors. Calloway smirked, sensing total victory. "If you think you have power," she taunted, "call your nobody father to save this junk." The room went completely still. Somewhere, an air vent hummed low and steady. A clock ticked on the far wall, slow and heavy. Every spectator held their breath, waiting for what came next. Brianna turned her head and looked straight at the judge. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "Okay," she said. "I will." What would happen when that call actually went through? Guards led her to a small side room at 9:45. An officer stood watching as she picked up the phone. Brianna dialed a number she had memorized since childhood. It rang once, then twice, then stopped. A deep, steady voice answered on the other end. "Bug, it's me," said David Jenkins. "What's wrong?" Brianna kept her voice low and clear. She explained the lead poisoning, the courtroom, and the judge. Her voice cracked only once, on the word Maya. She described the guards, the coffee stains, the broken screen. She described a judge who called her a dreamer from the slums. On the other end, she heard her father's chair push back fast. "Say her name again," he said. "The judge." Brianna repeated it slowly. "Beatrice Calloway." A pen scratched against paper somewhere in Washington. "Stay exactly where you are," her father said. "I'm coming." She told him her research was about to be destroyed. Silence hung on the line for one long second. Then her father's voice turned sharp with purpose. "Nobody touches that evidence," he said firmly. "Not one page." He hung up and moved fast in Washington. Officials at the Department of Justice sprang into action. 10 minutes later, a phone rang inside room 3C. A federal agent named Carter walked through the courtroom doors. He carried an emergency order signed by the Attorney General. "This evidence is now under federal protection," Agent Carter announced. "Nothing leaves this room." 2 more agents followed close behind him. They placed Brianna's machine inside a sealed evidence case. Carter photographed every page of her scattered notebook. He handled each sheet like it was made of glass. Guards who had grabbed Brianna's arms now stood frozen near the wall. Judge Calloway's face lost every trace of color. She had mocked a man she never expected to answer. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bench white and tight. She glanced toward the exit, then back at Carter's badge. There was nowhere left in that room to hide. What would happen when the true power behind Brianna finally arrived? That night, panic spread through the Thorncrest offices. At the Detroit Marriott, executives whispered in a locked suite. Marcus Vance tried to sneak into the FBI's temporary lab. He wanted to swap Brianna's soil samples for fake ones. Federal agents caught him before he touched a single bag. 2 agents pinned him against the lab door frame. Marcus shouted that he had every legal right there. Nobody in the hallway believed a single word he said. Thorncrest also leaked false stories to local news that evening. They claimed Brianna was a paid con artist targeting businesses. One station ran the story without checking a single fact. Neighbors on Jefferson Street began calling Martha in confusion. Martha simply hung up and unplugged the phone. At home, Martha paced the kitchen floor, worried sick. Brianna held her grandmother's trembling hand tightly. "Dad is coming," she said softly. "The truth is coming too." She spent that night awake with Dr. Vance. Together, they compared her map to old court records. 14 lawsuits over 5 years matched her red dots exactly. Dr. Vance spread yellowed court documents across his kitchen table. Brianna laid her hand-drawn map beside each file. Coffee cups piled up as the hours passed by slowly. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Vance froze mid-sentence. He tapped a finger on 2 matching addresses. "Look at this," he whispered, sliding the papers toward her. Every dismissed case sat inside a thorn crest property line. Brianna felt a chill move down her arms. The pattern was too exact to be an accident. Every poison neighborhood had one thing in common. Thorncrest had bought that land cheap right after. They bought it the moment Calloway threw out each case. Would the whole corrupt scheme finally come out in daylight? The next morning, room 3C looked completely different. FBI agents lined the walls in dark jackets. Reporters filled every open seat with notebooks ready. Residents from Jefferson packed the back rows tightly. Camera flashes popped near the courtroom entrance at 9:50. Martha sat near the front, wearing her best blue dress. Clara held her hand tightly on one side. Dr. Vance sat on the other, his old folder in his lap. Brianna wore the same denim jacket from the day before. Marcus Vance slipped quietly into a seat near the back. He avoided his father's eyes across the crowded room. Whispers rippled through the crowd as the doors opened again. Judge Calloway walked in trying to look calm. Her confidence cracked the moment she saw the front row. Attorney General David Jenkins sat there, watching her closely. Agent Carter stepped forward with a thick folder. "Our lab in Quantico confirmed her data," he said. Every reading was accurate to the decimal point. Whispers spread quickly through the crowded courtroom. Carter continued, reading from his notes. "Thorncrest wired $850,000 to an offshore account," he said. "That account belongs to Judge Calloway's husband." Calloway's hands began to shake at the podium. "I was set up," she insisted, voice cracking. "My staff handled those old cases, not me." Nobody in the room believed a single word. Brianna stepped up to the witness stand at last. She spread her red dotted map across the table. Point by point, she showed the poison locations. She named the families still living on that dirt. She explained how each lawsuit died under Calloway's gavel. She explained how Thorncrest profited every single time. Her voice never rose, never shook, never wavered. Judge Calloway broke down completely at the bench. Tears streaked down her face as reporters watched. The woman who once threw insults now had none left. Her hands trembled as she reached for a glass of water. The glass slipped and cracked against the wooden floor. Bailiffs stepped forward and read her rights aloud. She did not resist as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The same hands that once threw Brianna's papers now shook uncontrollably. Reporters scribbled notes as the courtroom buzzed with whispers. David Jenkins simply watched in silence, his jaw set firm. What punishment could possibly match such deep betrayal of trust? 3 months later, the Jefferson playground looked completely different. Fresh green grass covered the ground, where sick children once played. Sunlight spread warm and golden across the park. New swings hung from painted metal frames near the fence. Workers had planted young trees along the walking path. A small plaque near the entrance thanked the Jefferson community. Kids rode bikes on smooth new pavement without a single crack. The old chain-link fence had been replaced with white wood. Judge Beatrice Calloway was let out in handcuffs that final day. A federal jury convicted her of bribery and corruption. She received a life sentence with no chance of parole. Thorncrest Enterprises shut down within weeks of the trial. The company paid full damages to every harmed family. Several executives faced criminal charges of their own. Clara helped organize a small fund with the settlement money. Families used it to fix roofs and repair old porches. Dr. Vance returned to work at the city lab that spring. He asked for Brianna's algorithm to update their testing equipment. She agreed, on one condition: her name stayed on the credit. Brianna stood beside Martha near the playground fence. Maya's doctor stood with them too, smiling wide. Maya ran across the grass, healthy and laughing. Her kidneys had fully healed after months of care. She wore a bright yellow dress and new white sneakers. Her mother watched from a nearby bench, wiping happy tears. The Department of Justice approved a special cleanup grant. It totaled $4,217,830 for the entire Jefferson neighborhood. Crews arrived within days to remove the poisoned soil. Trucks hauled away the old, contaminated dirt, load by load. Workers laid fresh, tested soil across every empty lot. Families who once feared their own backyards began planting gardens again. Martha started a new bucket of tomatoes by the porch. She said the new dirt smelled different, cleaner somehow. The clinic doctor tested every child in the neighborhood again. Not one showed dangerous lead levels this time around. He posted the results on the clinic's front window. Neighbors stopped to read it, smiling for the first time in months. Brianna donated her old, cracked machine to a science museum. It sat behind glass, as a symbol of courage. A small plaque told her story to every visitor. The plaque read simply, "Built for $147.50, priceless in truth." School groups stopped by the display every week now. Kids pressed their hands against the glass, staring at the wires. A teacher once asked Brianna to speak to her class. Brianna agreed, telling her story in plain, honest words. She kept her mother's old notebook for herself instead. Its cracked leather cover still smelled faintly of dust and time. She added one final entry on the very last page. It read, "Some things are worth every risk you take." She watched the children play on the clean new grass. Her father stood quietly at her side, proud and still. He no longer needed to hide his visits behind closed doors. Reporters had already told the world whose daughter she was. For the first time, he walked beside her in the open. Brianna finally spoke the words she had carried inside. "Justice isn't in a judge's hammer," she said softly. "It's in whether we dare to protect the truth." The wind moved gently through the new grass. Somewhere behind them, Maya's laughter rang out clear and bright. A story that began with insults ended in healing. A quiet girl with a broken machine had changed an entire city. Martha sat on a new bench near the swings, watching it all. She thought back to the frightened girl who once hid a secret. Now that same girl stood tall in the afternoon sun. Some fights, she realized, were always worth the fear. Some truths were always worth carrying home.